Hi everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Monty if you are new here, and today I'm going to be telling you about all the books that I read in August and September. Typically I will do a monthly wrap up, but by the end of August I had only finished 3 books and that didn't warrant a full video, so I waited until now. I was actually reading quite a bit in August, but I was just reading so many books at one time that I didn't finish them by the end of the month, and then I finished a lot of them in September. In September I read 9 books total, so now I have 12 books to go over. First off, I read The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. I had seen this floating around a lot on Bookstagram, and most people describe this book as being life-altering, and it just wasn't that for me. I actually really enjoyed it in the moment. The author writes about how we all hold these limiting beliefs that kind of prevent us from reaching our truest potential in life. And he proposes 4 agreements to replace those limiting beliefs with in order to live a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life. So I really liked the premise. I really liked the idea of the book. When I was reading it, I was really into it. But the thing is, almost 2 months later, I don't remember a single agreement, not a one. So for me, this book just didn't have a lasting impact. I think that this is definitely a right time, right place type of book for someone. So I say go for it. It's super short and it might change your life. But it was 3 stars from me. The next book that I read is another nonfiction book, and that is Eve by Bohanan. I gave this book a very solid 4-star rating. The author opens up this book talking about how underrepresented women are in medical research and why that's a problem. She uses this as a jumping off point to then go into discussing the differences between the male and female body and how the female body in particular drove human evolution. This was a really interesting read. It had a lot of fun facts. For instance, I learned that when someone is breastfeeding, there's like this reciprocal uptake of the baby's saliva that informs the breast on adjusting the milk composition to suit the baby's specific needs. Fascinating stuff. So there's a lot of that in the book. But I did find it to be a little bit dry at times, and then towards the latter half of the book, I felt like the author went on some tangents that didn't really circle back to the main thesis of the book. I also really wished that I had read the book physically. I actually listened to it on audiobook. And here's the thing, and this is definitely a personal thing, but my listening comprehensions with books that contain unfamiliar terminology is just really poor. If I've never come across a word before, I need to visually see it written out so that I can assign meaning to it. It's the same reason that I can't read fantasy books on audio. There's just so many unfamiliar words. And this book did have quite a bit of scientific lingo that I don't feel like I fully grasped. So if any of that resonates with you, I would say go read this book, but read the physical version. After that, I picked up Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. This is the 2nd book in the Six of Crows duology. Because it's part of a series, I am not going to give a plot summary, but I will share my thoughts with you. So I enjoyed this book more than Six of Crows, I will say, but only marginally so. It was definitely more plot driven, which is kind of what I was looking for and what I felt like was missing in Six of Crows for me. There were a lot of fun action scenes, some good plot twist thrown in there, and a really nice diverse cast of characters. But at the end of the day, I just didn't love it the way that everyone else does, and it made me kind of sad because although there was more plot in the story and I like that, the book just felt a little bit more aimless to me. Like in Six of Crows, there was one singular mission. I knew what the characters were after, but in Crooked Kingdom, there were a bunch of mini missions. The plot felt kind of meandering, and I really didn't get a good sense of what they were striving for. But even that was fine. My biggest complaint is gonna be something that lovers of this book really disagree with me on, and that is, I don't think that this was a good found family story. And that was how it was marketed to me. I did think that each of the 6 characters really cared about their specific romantic partner, but found family is about friendships, and I didn't really feel like they all cared about each other as friends. There didn't really seem to be this sense of cohesion that you see in a really strong friend group. They just all were kind of working towards the same thing, but that was it. For instance, Kaz and Jesper are supposed to be like best friends, or Jesper is his right-hand man, but I didn't see one single tender moment between the two of them, and I really would have liked to. And then at the end, something really devastating happens to one of the 6 characters, and it just really felt like no one else cared. So there you have it. In my heart, this book gets a 3.5 out of 5, but I liked it more than Six of Crows, and I think I gave Six of Crows a 3.5. So I feel like I need to retroactively bump my rating of Six of Crows down to like a 3.25 and then give Crooked Kingdom a 3.5. Please don't come for me if you love this book, it's just my opinion. I followed that up with Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is the 3rd book in the Part of Your World trilogy. I loved it. It gets 4.5 stars for me, which is also what I gave the first book in this series, Part of Your World. The premise is pretty goofy, but in a positive way, I would say. Our 2 characters connect over a Reddit post, and they find out that both of them are kind of cursed with the same dating history, where every time they date someone and break up with that person will then go on to find their soulmate. So they figure that if they date each other and then break up, that they will each go on to find their person. It was just really sweet. There was definitely a lot of trauma, as I've come to expect with this series, but a lot of really, really good banter too. I feel like Abby Jimenez's banter almost exceeds Emily Henry's for me. I also really, really loved getting cameos from the characters in the previous 2 books in this one. That was just so fun. Overall, I thought it was a really great time. I highly recommend this entire series. Next, I read another romance. I read Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This was adorable. This honestly felt like I was putting on my favorite comforting rom-com and watching it for the millionth time. Even though I've never read this story before, that's just like the energy that it gave, and you know exactly how the book's gonna end from the moment that you start reading it, but you just eat it up anyway. So we're following this high school senior named Liz, who is just an absolute hopeless romantic. You find out that when Liz was younger, her mother passed away, and the way that she connected to her mom was through watching rom-coms. So there were a lot of rom-com references throughout the book, which is maybe why it felt so familiar. Since her mom's death, Liz has very much kept the rom-com spirit alive. She mentally assigns soundtracks to all of these sort of mundane life events and romanticizes them. I thought that was really cute. Big daydreamer, this girl. Prom is coming up, and she has her sights set on her elementary school crush, Michael, and she recruits the help of her neighbor and classmate, Wes, to make this happen. It's just a really cute story. I don't know what else to say. 4 stars. After that, I picked up another nonfiction. I picked up Biased by Jennifer Eberhardt. And here we have my first full-blown 5-star read. This is a book all about implicit racial biases. The author has her PhD in social psychology, and she conducts her own research on this very topic. So she's an expert. To me, it was just the perfect balance of research-backed data combined with anecdotes. So what the author would do is she would go over the results of a particular study, and they didn't have to be her own, although she did include her own studies in this book. And then she would follow it up with this real life story or example that would really drive her point home. And it's just such an important topic. I really loved this book. It was so readable. It was like one of the easiest nonfiction books I have ever picked up. So if you're new to nonfiction and the topic interests you, I would highly, highly recommend that you read this. You will fly through it. 5 stars. Then I had my only reread of the entire year, and that is The One by John Mars. I have talked about this in depth in 2 videos of mine that I've recently posted, my binge-worthy books and then also my top rated thrillers of all time, so I am not going to explain this book at all. Basically, this is a dystopian thriller that has major Black Mirror vibes. I enjoyed it a little less than I did the first time that I read it, but I still think that most people would enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars. stars. Then we have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This is a romance book, but with some serious undertones. I would not call this a rom-com, though it does have its funny moments. In this book, we're following two characters who are divorced from one another, and they're both just kind of having a difficult time getting back into the dating ring because they're secretly harboring feelings for one another still. There is a lot about grief and depression in this book. I would argue that it is the central theme of the entire story. I personally found those topics to be handled really well, but I would also say that that's not something that I've ever really had to deal with, so take my words with a grain of salt. There is some really good discussion about men going into therapy, and I really appreciated that. And generally speaking, I just tend to really like second chance romances, so if you're like me, you'll probably like this book. There was just one storyline that I wasn't really a fan of. I don't like it when there's a side character that's being strung along to create tension between the two primary characters that really want to be together. It's just not my thing, but I still gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Then we have yet another romance. I was really digging the end of summer romance vibes, so I picked up How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang. Okay, so this is about our main character, Helen, whose younger sister, Michelle, in high school dies by suicide. Michelle jumps in front of a moving car, and the driver of that car is Grant, who ends up being our main male character. Years after this tragedy, Helen and Grant end up working on the same TV show, and you can kind of imagine what happens from there. This book has a lot of smut, okay? And in my opinion, it is the best I've ever read. Usually, I kind of skim over sex scenes in books, not because I'm averse to them, I just don't like them a lot of the time. But in this book, I read every single word, and some of them I read twice, and I'm not afraid to admit it. This might be the first time ever that I've like really enjoyed smut. The caveat being that the sex seemed to be the focal point of connection between our two main characters, and I typically enjoy like a deeper emotional connection between two love interests. So do I recommend it? I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you really like smutty scenes, then I definitely think that you should pick it up. But if you don't like it, then I would say skip over this one. But me, personally, I gave this a 3.5. I then had another nonfiction book. This was the 2 months of like nonfiction and romance for me. And that book is Effortless by Greg McKeown. Hear me out, okay? The author, Greg McKeown, is a white Mormon businessman. Not necessarily the type of person I would generally seek advice from. I was looking for a nonfiction book to read for 75 hard, and this was in our closet, so I just like picked it up. And the crazy thing is, I ended up loving it. This book is all about going against the hustle and bustle culture, getting yourself off the hamster wheel, and just really making your life easy and enjoyable. And I just really liked that message. I also really loved that there were so many strategies that you could immediately implement in your life. For instance, there was this whole chapter or section on gratitude, and the author talks about how we all complain. Just all the time. We complain, and all that complaining does is bring us down energetically, and it doesn't really push forward our agenda. So what he recommended was that every time you complain, whether it's verbally or internally in your thoughts, that you follow it up with something that you're grateful for. And I started practicing this, and honestly, it has changed my life. It honestly has put me in such a positive mindset because I'm not dwelling on things that are so out of my control, which is what I often do. I also really like that at the end of each big section in this book, he has outlines that kind of just summarize all of his major talking points. So if you read the book in its entirety, you can then go and refer to those outlines and just get like little refreshers. One thing that I will just put out there is that I'm reading another book of his right now called Essentialism, and in it he kind of talks about the importance of reading books that have stood the test of time. So he mentions classics, and then he mentions a few religious texts, 3 in particular. He talks about the Torah, the Bible, and the Book of Mormon. And I just really didn't like the lack of inclusivity there. He didn't mention any Eastern religious texts, and that just rubbed me the wrong way. So I did just want to mention that. But despite the differences that Greg and I might have, I liked the points that he made in this book, and I gave it a 4.5. Next, I read my only memoir of the last 2 months, and that is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. I know that this book makes everyone cry, and I will say that it is the closest I have come to crying all year while reading. I have cried other times. While reading this, tears definitely welled up in the back of my eyes, but they just didn't fall down my face. This is a sad book. This is a gut-wrenchingly sad book. It's about the author's relationship with her Korean mother, who ultimately passes away due to pancreatic cancer. She talks a lot about how she connected with her mom through food, and also how she connected to the Korean part of her identity through Korean food. And I really related to the author in so many aspects of the book. Her mom also reminds me a lot of my mom. My mom's love language is 100,000,000,000% cooking. The author even talks about this with her own mom, but just like the attention to detail with preparing something exactly to someone's liking, even if it takes you a little bit more time and effort, just so that person can really enjoy their eating experience. Like, that is an Asian mom's way of showing love. That is my mom's way of showing love. And while I was reading this, I kind of realized how much I've taken that for granted. The food descriptions in this book are top notch. They were so good. I was salivating the entire time I was reading this, and I really need to go eat some Korean fare. This was definitely one of, if not my favorite memoir that I've read to date. It 100% gets 5 stars from me. We have come to the 12th and final book of this list, and I really hate to end this wrap up on a sour note, but this was my least favorite book that I read in the last 2 months. And that is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I know that this story is beloved by many, and I really don't want to offend anyone, so please don't take it that way. This is just my opinion. So in this book, we are following 2 teenagers who meet when they are like 14 years old or something like that, and they immediately connect over their love for reading. I liked that part. I liked the emphasis on books and literature, libraries, and reading. That was really fun. Anyway, they form an instant connection with each other, an instant friendship that eventually turns into more of a friendship, and by their senior year of high school, they're fully dating, and they end up breaking, but for reasons unbeknownst to us as the readers. And it was enough of a reason for them to completely cut off communication with one another. This book follows a then and now timeline, and in the now chapter, it's 11 years in the future, and the 2 characters run into each other after 11 years of no contact. And the story just kind of goes from there. There were some parts of this book that I thought were okay, like I said, with the whole like reading theme, but there were just so many pieces that really didn't work for me. I feel like the only thing that compelled me to push forward was the fact that I wanted to figure out what had happened to them their senior year. First off, I just really didn't connect with either of our characters. Macy, the female character, bothered me in particular. Her entire personality just seemed to center around her being closed off. You really don't get much about her other than that, just the fact that she really like keeps people at arm's length. Just like the whole like, oh, I don't want to get close to someone because I'm afraid that I'll lose them and that'll really hurt. Like, those are valid feelings, but it just kept getting repeated over and over, and I found it to be really tiresome by the end of the book. Then there was the relationship itself. Call me cynical, but the inability to ever love anyone else for 11 years with no contact when you only knew each other as kids, that just doesn't feel romantic to me. It feels unhealthy and like a bit obsessive. And then my biggest gripe with this book is when you finally find out what broke them apart senior year, it is awful. I hated everything about it. What I hated the most about it is that it involved a very serious situation that just wasn't handled with the gravity that it warranted. That's all I'm gonna say, but I don't recommend this book. And those are the 12 books that I read in August and September. I keep having to remind myself what month I'm in. I'm in October. Lots of romance, lots of nonfiction. That will not be the case moving forward. I plan on reading a lot of sci-fi, fantasy, and thrillers in the coming months, so that's kind of what you can expect in future wrap-ups. Let me know if you read any of these books and if you had different thoughts and opinions than mine, or if you agree, I'm cool with that too. I am going to go now. I have to go get ready for my 4-year anniversary date with my boyfriend. I'm very excited. We're gonna go to a really nice dinner, so that'll be fun. I hope you all have fun plans ahead of you as well, and that you're enjoying yourself wherever you might be. I'm gonna sign off now. Goodbye.